In the aftermath of the 2024 assembly elections, if you want to understand Jharkhand's voting patterns, you first need to reconsider the role of Adivasis in India's history. Generally speaking, both during and after British rule, India's tribal peoples suffered a serious reduction in their mobility and autonomy, which eroded their once mighty geopolitical influence. They've also come to be seen as somewhat isolated geographically, politically, and religiously from the rest of the subcontinent. But that's an inaccurate stereotype. The fact is that tribal peoples have repeatedly and successfully engaged with agrarian states on their own terms. Over the last 2000 years, the Pali and Surtiman peoples shaped the fates of the Chola Empire in South India, others established the Hoysala kingdom in South Karnataka, some like the Bhanjas have risen to be aristocrats in inland Odisha, and Gonds served as sultanate vassals in the inland Deccan. In all these cases, Adivasis displayed an astounding ability to control trade routes, appropriate religious ideas, and absorb new political cultures. Jharkhand is no exception. In recent decades, India's far right has made a sustained attempt to claim that Jharkhand's peoples are originally Hindu, and the BJP's 2024 assembly campaign leaned heavily into Hindutva tropes such as fear-mongering about Muslim infiltration. There are clearly Hindu elements in Jharkhand's Adivasi religious traditions. Consider, for example, the epic of the Munda people, studied by K.S. Singh, the former Director General of the Anthropological Survey of India, in the Munda epic, a reinterpretation. The Mundas belong to the Chotanagpur plateau, a resource-rich territory that shaped Gangetic history in the Iron Age around 500 BCE. Their epic relates how their sun spirit, Singh, assisted by the virgin goddess, came down to the earth to punish the Asur people of the Netarhat plateau. Finding that the Asur's iron forges were polluting the forest and seeing that they were cruel to birds, Singh trapped their boys and men in a kiln and incinerated them. According to Singh, this drubbing convinced the Asurs to turn to agriculture and confirmed the Mundas in their own agrarian practices. Now, as Singh points out, Singh is sometimes represented today as the Hindu deity Krishna, and the notion of his descent from the heavens must come from the idea of an avatar. The virgin goddess too seems to have been inspired by the Hindu goddess Durga, but that's where the similarities end. The Munda virgin goddess lacks the association with warfare and beauty that Durga possesses, and Singh legends have little trace of Vaishnavism in them. According to Dr. Singh, the appearance of Hindu elements dates back to the 15th century, when a tide of bhakti religiosity emerged from the neighboring regions of Bengal and Bihar, and suggests that the Mundas adapted these elements to explain their relationship to the rival Asurs. This ability to absorb ideas from the wider world to turn them to local religion and politics is visible again and again from the 19th century onwards in Jharkhand. The British Raj, which was seeking to exploit the region's resources, encouraged the immigration of Hindu settlers from Bihar, Bengal and beyond. Historian P.K. Shukla writes in Adivasi Peasantry Struggle for Land Rights and the Quest for Identity that the British tried to understand Adivasis as primitive, ethnically inferior, non-Aryan noble savages as opposed to the civilized Aryan upper caste who made up the backbone of the British colonial enterprise. From the British perspective, Adivasi hostility to the colonial state was simply ethnic hostility from the savage against the civilized. But nothing could be further from the truth. Shukla's analysis of colonial records shows an oppressive economic system. The Raja of Chotanagpur, for example, handed out dozens of villages to immigrant courtiers, requiring locals to compulsorily provide free labor. From as early as 1767, Jharkhand's tribal peoples formed unprecedented alliances with each other to expel these new landlords. But the British simply won over existing zamindars, and by 1855, colonial police, revenue officials and courts had set up a brutally extortionate system. Loan interest rates ranged from 50 to 500%, and market prices were exploitative, and lands were forcibly appropriated on top of Christian missionary conversion. And so Adivasi uprisings continued, starting with the 1855 Santhal rebellion. There were 4 such others until the most famous such movement, that of Birsa, a young Munda man. Now, Birsa grew up in the 1870s under the shadow of colonial exploitation. Having received a rudimentary missionary education, Birsa then spent a brief stint under a Vaishnavite preacher wearing a sacred thread. He then went on to spearhead a massive uprising against the British, attacking police stations, bazaars, and churches, which to him were all sites of Adivasi exploitation. This has led the Sangh Parivar to portray Birsa as a protector of Hindus, which is a claim that was thoroughly investigated by journalist Nolina Minj. According to her report, songs by Birsa's followers also suggest he attacked temples. And according to Dr. K.S. Singh, apparently inspired by both Hindu and Christian ideas, Birsa demanded the end of Bonga spirit worship and halted the consumption of rice beer. He came to be seen as a god in his own right, opposed to all outsiders, in his followers' words, Rajas, Hakims, Zamindars, and Christians. Now, Birsa died in 1899, captured after a disastrous battle with colonial sepoys, but resistance continued. During World War I, another young man, Jatra Bhagat, claimed to have received a vision from Bhagwan and reiterated Birsa's commandments, mobilizing tens of thousands of Kurukh or Oraon Adivasis in what came to be known as the Tana Bhagat movement. Historian Sanjay Kumar in the Tana Bhagat movement in Chotanagpur points out that the Tana Bhagats prayed to a certain German Baba, apparently to antagonize the war-paranoid British. They also claimed in their pamphlets, and I quote, "It is no longer the Raj of Zamindars. The earth belongs to ploughmen. Nobody should give any rent or chowkidari tax. The baniyas must not attend the bazaars because they rob the men. Marwadis, may your cloth be burned to ashes. Musalmans, may you perish. The vagabonds and prostitutes will perish as soon as Phalgun comes. Brahmins, Rajput Rajas and Zamindars had nothing to eat when they came here, but now they have become so powerful as to beat the Oraons and Mundas. Christians are the lowest class. God says so." Now, there's a consistent trend here, and it's not the Hindutva narrative of Hindu Adivasis driving away Christian missionaries. The fact is that Jharkhand's people had and have a consistent ability to absorb new narratives, seek to reform and change their faiths, and insist on their right to decide what happens with their resources, no matter who the colonizer is. Their politics privilege their shared lands and Adivasi identity rather than external religious labels. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Follow us everywhere on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Anirudh and on Twitter at Kanisetti. We'll see you next week.